So this is Nick Kemp, and I'm with Frank Bourke from the Recognition and Research Project for NLP. So Frank, what is the RandR Project?
Real simple, Nick. We've tried to put together a group of people. We've got about 1,000 from academia, business, NLP, etc., aimed at doing research in the sense of scientific research on the NLP materials, so as to prove to the rest of the world what the NLP community knows clinically, that these things really work well. I say when I'm talking to my confreres in psychology, I think the NLP materials are the largest advance in psychotherapy in the last 100 years. Mm. And that's a pretty big claim, but and I said I think that. I myself won't know it until we've put it through the grid that I call scientific psychology, scientific measurement. And that's really hard because the methodology doesn't lend itself to stratification. It works in a fashion that you adapt what you're doing to each person as they come along. Mm. Whereas science requires, well, let's take and do it over 100 times, and when it works 99 times or 80 times or 70 times, then you have that kind of predictive validity, and that's what we're going for.
So what's the aim of the project? It's in simple terms.
I'm sorry, to measure NLP techniques in action, right, so that we can prove they really work.
Okay, because it seems often the comment made from the outside is, here's a bunch of people who do this thing called NLP that can't even agree upon themselves, never mind do anything else. So how has that been, how have you been received, bearing in mind that there's not exactly a great unity often within even the two creators of NLP, never mind the trainers?
Well, I wrote both founders in a respectful way, saying, you know, I knew them back when they are the people actually trained me.
Yeah.
And I left NLP, you know, after 2 or 3 years of learning, because it wasn't interested in doing research and appealing or integrating into what I would call the existent professional world. Mm. But Richard never answered me, and John said, what would this do for us that we don't already have? That hadn't changed in 25 years.
Yeah, yeah. And what I was impressed from hearing yesterday, because we're currently at the IASH conference, was that this is not a sort of corner shop, sort of 30-buck type operation. You know, we're talking about something which is pretty substantive.
And I tried to explain that was a difficulty I had with the NLP community at the front end, Nick, because to do a pilot study, for instance, in one of the NLP pieces, which, like, you know, the first one we've picked out is PTSD, to do a pilot study is $500,000. So you're not going to get that done unless you're in with large grants, foundations. So you now have to develop an organizational structure that lends itself to that kind of money, organization, history, technique, skills, etc. And that's the reason that it's taken, what, almost 3 years now. But we have a board of directors from the executive world, business, university administration, professor emeritus, research, NLP experts, into a leadership team committed to do this with a board of advisors of 120 strong with skills from different areas, and a volunteer group of NLP practitioners of over 800 people.
Wow.
Been 3 years hard work.
Well, that's a lot in 3 years.
Well, yes and yes. Yeah, I think so. At this point, I'm a little amazed. If I'm honest, you know my history. I got ready to die from cancer. It didn't do it, and then said, "Oh, what do I do now?" And in one of those, recalibration, said, somebody ought to research that NLP stuff and get it into the mainstream. And in all honesty, I felt very much like this is a Don Quixote movement. The probability of being able to do that, I made, in all honesty. I met with Judith Delosia and Robert Dill's good friends, who were the people I went back to in 2003, and said, I think I'd like to give this a shot. So I wrote it all up and gave it to them, said, there's the shot. And they said, we don't know how, you're the old researcher. I said, no, you don't understand. I just did my work. It just took me, 3 weeks. There's what you would do over the next 10 years. Now, you'll have to find some people in the NLP movement and and they were just consistently marvelous about, how shall I say, putting it back on me. And here I am.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, one of the big criticisms that comes from the outside world, certainly, I mean, I've not been around as long as you in NLP, but certainly 10, 12 years, is this whole thing about research. And they go, look, you've got a field here that's been going for 3 decades. Where's the research? You're making all these different claims, whether it's on a business or therapeutic level, on any level, show us some kind of research. So what sort of response have you had from individuals who are non-NLP who've been involved in this?
It's hilarious. I mean, it really is funny. And in terms of the Don Quixote portion of this, if I go to the professional community, I mean, Ph.D. psychologists, research laboratory, people in outcome studies and psychotherapy would be the scientific community you would talk to. And I say, hey, I want to research NLP. They do something like, that's exaggerated nonsense. Why don't you do, a crystal healing or develop a snake oil that actually cures cancer? And in the other vein, I go to the NLP community and say, this really should be researched. And you're talking to generally a group of people with bachelors or in education or psychology who have learned the techniques and are using them with people in agencies, or they've set up as NLP practitioners and have no understanding or appreciation of what scientific research in the context of therapy or health-related materials is. So that getting started was really hard. And thank God, for people like Rich Liotta and Rick Gray and Steve Andreas, who were sufficiently versed in, a foot in both worlds like myself.